like to think I've always been interested in telling stories. In elementary school, whenever we were told to write stories in English class, I was always so excited to write down all of my crazy ideas and share them with my classmates. My stories were always a little out of the box. A simple prompt about a paper bag being set on my desk would turn into a full-blown Harry Potter fanfic with my own original characters. The fake letter I wrote to a hotel in our area wasn't just disgruntled, it was horrific. And don't even get me started on the crossover between The Secret Garden, Harry Potter, and Tom Sawyer. Yet, my creativity couldn't make up for what my teachers were actually grading on: spelling. I've never been good at spelling, and I don't think I ever will be. Whenever I was told to just sound it out, things tended to get a little strange. For about a year and a half, I spelled of as UV. I was so embarrassed about my spelling abilities, and even when I revised my paper a million times, there would still be some mistakes left over. Back before every 3-year-old had an iPad in their hands, the kids at my school would write every essay by hand. Also, the final drafts had to be written in cursive, which is just dumb. I remember being so frustrated because there were words I wanted to use but couldn't spell. My teachers and other classmates just assumed I wasn't good in English because every paper I got back had red ink all over it. But all of that started to change when I entered middle school. Middle school, for me, started in 6th grade, and suddenly I had access to a laptop in every classroom. No longer would I have to guess and wait for help with words I didn't know how to spell because suddenly there was a magical thing called spell check. I didn't have to be embarrassed to show my writing to other people anymore. I could suddenly revise on my own and discover what a rewarding process it can be. All of this came to a head when they announced the prompt for the Jefferson County Writing Contest. Okay, despite everything I just said, there was very little chance that 6th grade me would actually finish a story to submit to the contest. However, that year my teacher decided to make participation mandatory, so I had to do it. Still, I remember being excited to spend class time working on the project. After all, writing stories was my favorite thing to do in English. The prompt was simple, yet open-ended. Imagine you are given a time machine. How did you get a hold of it? What does it look like? And most importantly, when would you go? Most people wrote about visiting their grandparents or going back in time to experience some great moment in history. Yeah, my story was a little bit different. Back to Save the Mullet, despite its title, was a story about me and my best friend going back in time to cut my dad's mullet off. The explanation for this was that my dad had recently lost his hair in an accident at the glue factory, whatever that means, and was depressed at losing his one reminder of his glory days in the 80s. So obviously, the only course of action was to turn our old minivan into a time machine, using YouTube, and cut off the mullet so my dad would never fall in love with it in the first place. At a little over 2 pages, double-spaced, and including the line, "I kicked him where the 80s sun didn't shine," Back to Save the Mullet is probably the best and worst thing I have or will ever come up with. Although I don't remember when I saw it for the first time, I have to assume that Back to the Future had a major impact on Back to Save the Mullet, so I wasn't even that original as 11-year-old. I remember telling my friends about the story I was writing for the contest and seeing the confused looks on their faces. What's a mullet? Despite their lukewarm responses, I loved my story and was proud to have created something that other people would see. When the invitation to the award ceremony came, I couldn't hardly believe it. First place. First place! I had never won anything in my life, and now I was looking at my name next to first place. Not only that, but the man in charge of the writing contest for my entire county quoted my story during the awards ceremony. Not the kick in the groin part, because, of course, even though that's the best part, but my words, free from embarrassing spelling errors, were read aloud in a room full of people in a positive light. And they liked it. They laughed at an 11-year-old's interpretation of the 80s and smiled at my happy ending. When I saw how happy my little story had made these people and how proud my dad was of my success, I knew I wanted to write for the rest of my life. Plus, the prize money felt pretty good in my little hand. As dumb as Back to Save the Mullet was, It made people feel something. From then on, I recognized that power. I learned that if I could make people smile, especially if I could make them laugh, then they would listen to me. And really, that's all that I've ever wanted.